This is KLEAN Radio.
Welcome to KLEAN Radio. That's KLEAN with a K. Welcome to everybody listening on our flagship station, 790 KABC, the World Wide Web at KLEANradio.com or on XM 165. I'd like to welcome my co-host with the most, Erica Fab Spiegelman.
Thank you, Judah.
You are, yeah.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here on this Easter Sunday, and it's a little bit rainy out, but it's a nice day.
It's to people all across the country because we're a national show, Erica.
I
worldwide.
Know.
It might not be raining where they are.
I know, so that's why I like to give them a little bit of a little bit of a lowdown on what we're experiencing here.
And they don't feel bad, okay? Because people
we usually have great weather.
Snowing, and
I know.
But it's funny. Just so everybody out there knows, we're in Los Angeles. And one of the funniest things is when it rains here a little bit, it really freaks people out.
Well, it does. I mean, they kind of go crazy with the, on the news, and there's going to be, a big storm and everybody should stay home and watch out. So it's a little exacerbated at times.
When I had my scooter, I cared more. Now that I have a car, it's a lot. I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Because the scooter, it was, I had to look out for the weather report. But let's tell people a little bit about who you are. You're Erica Spiegelman. You're a KDAC, a licensed KDAC.
Yeah.
You write an amazing blog for Maria Shriver's magazine. For her website,
I'm a chemical dependency, counselor and addiction therapist. And, I kind of work at inpatient centers, outpatient centers, do groups, writing, books.
And what I really love it, and I was talking, we have an amazing guest tonight. We have Lisa Cypers Kamen, who's just an all-around awesome radio host, television personality. She's been on TED. I'll explain what TED is in a few seconds.
Positive psychology she believes in and has a great nonprofit.
Right, not the teddy bear. But that's a lot like you, and that's one of the things that I love is that, we're a show about addiction and recovery, and in a sense, we don't really care how you get recovered as long as you're in the process of recovery.
Absolutely. Yeah, we believe in, everyone has a path and whatever works for them. With our guest tonight, she really believes in kind of a holistic approach, treating the mind, body, and spirit. And, that overall, I think no matter what path you take, I think it's really important to really cultivate some self-love, compassion for yourself, positive regard for yourself and people, how you treat people. It all comes back around. So I think it's really special that we have her on tonight so she could share kind of how she got into what she's been up to. And
so if everybody out there listening, please give us a call. The number here is 888-375-3613. That's 888-375-3613. This is a great opportunity for any questions you have about addiction. If somebody in your family has a problem with alcohol or addiction or really pretty much everything, give us a call. The number again is 888-375-3613. That's 888-375-3613. It's very topical right now. This next thing, I was reading the paper the other day, a couple of weeks ago actually, and I love sports. It's the beginning of baseball season, but we're not talking about baseball tonight. One of the things I wanted to talk about was last year's MVP in the American League. His name is Miguel Cabrera. He won the Triple Crown, an amazing baseball player, but he's sober now. And he's had a really, a rough path. In 2009, he was arrested. In 2010, he had issues. He's had a lot of issues. And he's, sober now. And it was really cool. Last year when the Tigers, not the Dodgers, when the Tigers won the division championship, in the clubhouse, the American League Championship, he didn't, even though they used non-alcoholic, for the champagne,
right.
He still, part of me thinks that the reason why he didn't partake is he didn't want people that were watching to think that, he was partaking in the champagne, even though it wasn't real champagne.
Right. Yeah. You know what I think is interesting about what you just said is that, I don't think that people, especially in sports and in kind of in people that are in the media, I don't think they really have good aftercare, good, someone to help them really with safety tips of how to like go and celebrate and how to really engage and feel comfortable. I mean, you said that you felt that he was a little uncomfortable. If you picked up on that, or you?
Well, no, I don't know. I would imagine, but it's the reason. I mean, a lot of times people. We're going to introduce our amazing guest in a second, and this is something I want to talk about when we introduce her. This is years ago. When I got sober in New York, I'm a huge New York Giant fan, and the New York Giants had a quarterback on the team. His name was Kerry Collins. Now, Kerry Collins had been kicked out of like New Orleans and a couple different places for alcoholism. You know, he was a mess. And when he came to the Giants, he wasn't even, he didn't have a driver's license. So Joe Juravicius, the wide receiver, was his designated driver. So me and my friend Smilin' Bill, I was always curious, like, what does he do after games? Like, how does he celebrate? He must be alone. He's like the quarterback for the New York Giants, and when they're having the party afterwards, he can't party.
Well, did you think this when you were, you know, using yourself, or was this later on?
I didn't even care.
No. I'm saying about him, you know, like.
No, I was sober at the time. It was never even a thought.
Yeah.
But the thing was, so me and my friend Smilin' Bill, I would go. I got this gift. A guy in the 12 Steps. His name was Joe the bartender. He used to take me to one Giant game a week. So a couple times when Joe the bartender didn't come, I took my friend Smilin' Bill. So we came up with this great idea to wait in the parking lot and say hello to Kerry Collins. And like, you know, as he was walking after the game, we would like say, hey, and talk to him about, you know, being sober. So my friend Smilin' Bill brings him a 1-year coin and a 2-year coin because we weren't sure how long he was going to be how long he was sober. And so we're waiting. Finally, Kerry Collins comes out, and my friend Smilin' Bill, we say hello to him, and my friend Smilin' Bill goes, I wasn't sure how long you're sober, a year or two, so I brought you both. He goes, well, I'm 19 months sober. My friend Smilin' Bill goes, well, take both. This is for when you get 2 years. And every week we would do this. We'd wait for Kerry Collins to come out, and we would say hi to him and talk to him. And my teacher, her husband was a huge Giant fan in college, she said, can you get me his autograph? I said, for an A. And so I got her husband, Kerry Collins' autograph in the yearbook, and I got an A in English. It was because I studied.
Good story, though. That's a good story.
And Erica, why don't you tell people where they could find us on Facebook?
Yeah, well, you can find us at KLEAN Radio on Facebook, and we have past episodes. We have some great information. We really also want you guys to, you know, write into us any questions you have. You know, we're live video stream every week, and so for us to have your feedback and the questions that you want answered, we really want to help you. We want to give any kind of support that's needed. I'm creating kind of a group for women that have family members that are addicted to drugs or alcohol, and we have a lot of parents that call in, so I'm putting together a support group on Facebook. I'm at, on Twitter, Erica Spiegelman, and so we're really doing some exciting things.
Shameless hawking. But if you just
we're
tuned in,
Facebook.com/KLEAN Radio. So just so everyone knows, and on Twitter it's at KLEAN Radio. So that's Facebook.com/KLEAN Radio, and then on Twitter it's at KLEAN Radio.
Thank you, Erica. And if you just tuned in or tuned on, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. Give us a call at 888-375-3613. That's 888-375-3613. One of the things I want to talk about tonight is Miguel Cabrera, and it's just using him as an example. I think when people are getting sober, and when people are coming back, and we're going to talk about this with our guests, when people are coming back from anything that's sort of structured, and getting back into the real world is frightening. Right.
So how do they have a good aftercare plan?
How do they reintegrate? So let's welcome to KLEAN Radio an amazing woman. Her name is Lisa Cypers Kamen. Other than, she told me this before the show, she's a spokesperson for Florida Citrus, which I'm amazed by. I'm even more amazed that she doesn't get free orange juice. I am your new manager.
Or oranges.
She's a filmmaker. She's a positive psychology coach. She's the author. She's the host of Harvesting Happiness Talk Radio. Let's welcome to KLEAN Radio, Lisa Cypers Kamen.
Welcome, Lisa.
Thanks, Erica. Thanks, Judah. Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
All right.
I'm like that guy. When I enjoy a first date, I go right for the second. So if I like the cat, you're coming back.
Seals the deal
you
right
already
away.
have a second date, Lisa.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about who you are. I mean, you are all about the positive energy.
I am all about felicitation. That's what I tell people when they say, what do you do? I say, I'm a felicitator. I create happiness. I help people create happiness in their lives. And happiness is often thought of as a really annoying word because we always think of that yellow smiley face, which annoys some of us. But really what we're talking about with happiness is something much deeper and much more profound, sustainable well-being, peace, contentment, balance, equanimity, flourishing.
It's a big word, equanimity.
Equanimity, yes, that is a big word.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Where did this spawn from? Have you always been happy?
I would say that I'm basically a happy person, but I was born into a family of people who really suffered from depression.
Okay, yeah.
There's a lot of depression in my family. We've had family members commit suicide in generations past, and it is in the DNA. And I myself have struggled in the past with depression, and I have just chosen to manage a very, very different way. And that is through a self-mastery approach, one that is available to any of us.
That's so great, because that's exactly what a lot of people want in sobriety. There's a lot of parallels, you know. It doesn't matter if you're suffering from depression or you're suffering from a drug or alcohol addiction. You know, it's about mastering that self-love, which we had talked about earlier, it sounds like.
Indeed. You know, and at the root of depression and at the root of addiction, there is, excuse me, there's deep sadness and grief over something.
Tremendous.
Over
Tremendous.
something. And the issue is really identifying what that something is, but more importantly, setting up a program how to get beyond it and master it and grow from it.
And what about healing it?
And healing it. But I think the byproduct of healing comes from the transformation of the trauma or the stress into growth. As opposed to saying, I'm going to go out and heal this thing. Well, I think the goal is more to start feeling better. And as a byproduct of feeling better, the healing takes place.
And there's some closure, it sounds like, for people. Yeah.
So was there one moment in specific, you know, just one moment that said, I have to change? I mean, you obviously had this family stuff, but what was that defining moment that said, you know, where you broke the chains almost?
I went back to school midlife to become a psychologist. And I thought I wanted to have a traditional clinical psychology practice where I'd see patients and help them solve their problems with the magic elixir. And I quickly realized that most of us, when we go for traditional psychotherapy, we continue to present with the same issues over and over and over again. And there's a lot of story involved, a lot of why me, sometimes a lot of pity. I was just going to say pity parties going on.
Yeah, of course.
And I thought, ooh, I got myself into this graduate studies program, but it's not where my heart lies. So the aha moment for me was...
And that's not the band.
No, it was not the band.
Good band, though.
Yes, yes. The aha moment really came from this discovery of positive psychology, which is about a 30-year-old discipline within psychology, and it really is strengths-based training. So it's about identifying what's right with life as opposed to what's wrong with life.
But here's a good...
And that's reprogramming your brain.
Yes.
So
completely.
Obviously, you know, you help a great deal of people out there. So there are people driving around right now that are hearing you that they could be suffering from alcoholism, could be suffering from mental illness, but you're able to say to some people, you need more help than I could give you.
Or what about someone that's just worried all the time, you know, like stressed out? Like there's a lot of everyday people that are listening, you know, driving around listening right now that are worried about a deal closing or worried about how they're going to pay their mortgage or their taxes are coming up, you know, day-to-day things. And people really sit in the negative and they spin these stories that I'm not going to have enough money to pay on time. And so how do you move people from this kind of negative space, negative way of thinking to more of a positive light that I will make, you know, I will
make... You tell them to pay their bills.
Well, no, this is a big deal. This is true because people really, they spin these negative stories in their heads, and instead of them going to the positive or it will work out, they go to the negative. It's just easier.
Well, it's a set point. You know, some of us are more predisposed to being negative than positive, so there's that element. But there are also two other things that we do as people very regularly. We fret about the past, what happened in the rearview mirror, or we worry about the future, what's coming through the windshield. So really the goal is to allow ourselves to savor the present moment. You know, to take a very mindful approach.
Mindful,
I couldn't agree with what you're saying. By the way, if you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. That's KLEAN with a K. Give us a call at 888-375-3613. That's 888-375-3613. We're in the studio tonight with Lisa Cypers Kamen. She's really an amazing woman. You're an entrepreneur of happiness. You're like that's your new term. I'm going to leave that on your voicemail. An entrepreneur of happiness.
Good.
And I help people, Lisa, come up with good terms.
He gives nicknames.
I do. I give great nicknames. But one of the things I want to talk about is, you know, you're very big into with the troops. You're very big into, and you told me this statistic with veterans, and you told me some crazy statistic that 23 soldiers a day are committing suicide.
I did. And the statistics change on a day-to-day basis, but the present statistic that's being quoted, if you do a Google search through the VA and other sources, is 23 suicides a day. And this really is an epidemic in the making for several reasons. They're not only the suicides, those are the ones that are being reported to be service-connected. Somebody, in other words, who has served, who has then gone on to kill him or herself. But there's also the homicides and the secondhand trauma that are also associated with combat trauma, people who go off to war, they come home, and they are extremely challenged with the reintegration process.
Right.
And I think that's a huge thing. We don't reintegrate. And one of the things I love about KLEAN, and this isn't an infomercial for KLEAN, but one of the things I love about it is we really focus on when people get out of treatment. You know, we do these things called Sober Fun Day. We have an amazing alumni program, which I do a lot of that stuff because I've been in rehabs. And, you know, if you ever see Shawshank Redemption, there's a great line in it where he says the walls become your friends. And, you know, so people become very good in rehab. They became very good in the Army or in professional sports. And the second they're out, they don't know what to do. Well,
and also with the VA, with the veterans, there's something called post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah. And so PTSD is what's really the acronym for it. And
she doesn't like the last part, though. And I learned that before the show.
Yeah. Good.
Because it takes away PTSD. It says disorder.
Disorder,
so people,
right. So it puts a negative connotation into their brains already, which, right? But I'm just saying the difference between that is what, well, not the difference, the similarity actually in some cases is that there's a lot of trauma with people that have been addicted to drugs and alcohol, whether it's from, you know, childhood, some kind of family trauma, or the trauma that they've created themselves as they've been using drugs, so as adults, so feeling ashamed of their behavior, feeling embarrassed. So I always say to people that we have to recognize the trauma no matter, you know, what the scale is, because it's a continuum. You have people that have been abused to people that went to war, that saw people being killed, to people that have caused their own trauma. So I just think it's such a huge part in healing is to acknowledge the trauma.
Well, acknowledging the trauma and processing the emotions. I mean, what we're talking about with positive psychology, because people often say, well, that's just happyology, you know, that, you know, you really...
Well, that's what I was going to get into before was...
Yes, and that's not the case at all. In fact, it is extremely important to process the emotions, but it's also important to recognize that we needn't be defined by the trauma.
Which is a great point.
Yes.
I mean, I say that to people all the time. You know, I'm sober, but I'm Judah first. You know, and it's amazing that I am sober, but I'm Judah first. And I think sometimes in the 12-step world, which I'm a big fan of because I go, I think sometimes that gets lost and you become so defined by the trauma and your past.
Right.
And but one of the questions I wanted to ask you, so is you treat people with happiness. You treat people, and I think that's an amazing thing. But there have to be points where happiness doesn't, you know, people need more than what you could offer sometimes.
Indeed. And if any of the listeners out there are returning home from war or confronted with any traumatic situation, if you are self-medicating, if you're raging, if you're having suicidal thoughts, if you are not able to show up for your life in a daily productive way, you need treatment. You need help.
Right.
And this is really important. You know, that no amount of happyology is going to help you alone. This is part of an integrated program.
Part of the tools.
Yes, it's part of the tools.
And I think a lot of times people don't really get that you could go to the 12 steps, you could go see a therapist, a psychiatrist, a happy entrepreneur.
I always say you could do all of it.
And it all works together. It can all work together.
Right. It doesn't have to be either or. There's an and, you know?
It's, you know, this is a cheeky way of saying it, but it is a cocktail. It really is about putting together a treatment plan that is workable for the individual.
Right. I call it a recipe for everyone.
Recipe, yes.
Yeah, it's good. Well, it is the same thing, but yes, correct. Yeah.
So let's get back to the troops a little bit. Let's get back to the reintegration. You have this amazing program.
We do. In 2010, I started Harvesting Happiness for Heroes, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we do one-on-one coaching, we do live workshops, and most recently, on May 22nd, we're going to be launching Reboot, which is a 6-week online community integrated combat trauma recovery program.
Oh, how great.
So a service member can come into our program privately, anonymously, excuse me, and learn the tools and principles of positive psychology, including mindfulness training in an online environment.
Do you think it's a machismo thing? You know, we live in a culture, and a couple weeks ago we were talking about this. We had Dr. Dina in, and we didn't really get to talk about this enough. She's a pot doctor, and one of the things we were talking about.
She's not a doctor, but she owns it.
Right, she's right. Dr. Snoop calls her Doc, and that's where the nickname comes from. But one of the things we were talking about was certain cultures. You know, we're in the rehab world, you're in the happiness world, and there is still segregation in many ways, that certain cultures aren't getting the help that they need, you know, because of, culture. And, you know, how hard is it, even with the troops, to say it's okay to talk about this stuff? Because, it's hard for a man to admit he has an issue.
Well, it's hard for a man or anyone to admit that they have a moral injury. And I think that that's a big part of what we're talking about, whether it's combat trauma or any form of trauma that leads you down a path to self-destructive behavior. So there is the issue of addressing one's emotions and being willing to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is very fashionable, by the way, right now. You hear a lot of talks being given on vulnerability. So for men to really express their emotions is key. And it is the only way to, I think, that I have learned to successfully process what's going on is to talk about it.
But, you know, it's hard because I think that the troops especially, you know, don't get a lot of education on the fact that they can be vulnerable and they can express themselves. I think that they're kind of pre-programmed to, you know, march forward, march on, and be a man. And,
it's the culture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The culture of it just doesn't give them any kind of room to ask for help. And there has to be more funding also for that, you know.
Well, you make a very, very good point because we're
Every
training.
once in a while she does.
Oh,
just don't let it.
Listen,
don't let it go to your head, Eric.
That was,
please.
He just gave me credit. I'm going to savor that. Yeah.
And no, Erica's actually, I'm so happy with this, you know, that you came into the studio tonight, because this is a, you know, for us at KLEAN, this is a huge thing. We love talking about the help that people aren't getting because of fear. You know, for years in the, you know, in the 12-step world, it was fearful for people to say they needed to be, you know, with medicine, that medicine could help. And I love that what you're doing is you're bringing something out that needs to be, you know, spoken about.
Well, it does need to be spoken about. It needs to be destigmatized, and that's the other big problem, especially for men. You know, we're more emotional. We are going to tend to talk about what's going on in our emotional life much more readily than a man. However, talking is key. You know, getting it out, and maybe it's a peer mentor. You know, sometimes you have to just dip your toe in a little bit, and you may not be ready for a full-on immersion program, but by talking about it,
but we need to give them an opportunity to fund them and give them some, you know, give them some help.
And with that, we're going to go to break. If you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. We have a great topic coming up next. We're going to talk about a story that's close and dear to Erica's heart, which is heroin being on the rise with teenagers in Orange County. And her friend is an amazing documentary filmmaker. And we'll also be back with Lisa Cypers Kamen, an amazing person, spokesperson for the Florida Citrus Group, and just an all-around amazing guest. And if you just tuned in, the discussion continues at KLEANradio.com.
Thanks.
Are you struggling with an addiction that's ruining your life? Want to have a confidential conversation with a professional that will immediately assist you? Do you suspect a loved one is abusing drugs and would like a free drug testing kit and consultation? KLEAN Treatment Center is standing by right now to help those with addictions and the people who care about them. Call 888-601-6040. That's 888-601-6040. Or go to KLEAN Treatment Center, that's KLEAN with a K, KLEANTreatmentCenter.com.
Welcome back to KLEAN Radio. We have an amazing show tonight. We're in the studio with the awesomely talented Judah Friedman. And, you guys didn't see that one coming
Judah,
out,
let me introduce you,
And we have Erica Abfab Spiegelman.
Hi, everybody.
We have Lisa Cypers Kamen, spokesperson for the Florida Citrus. She's a filmmaker. She's positive psychology coach. I just love the Florida Citrus thing, by the way. I think that's so cool. And talk about it. I just want to get quickly, because people, you're not just a spokesman, you're there for the health part of it.
I was hired by the Florida Department of Citrus to be their happiness expert and spokesperson for an amazing campaign called Take on the Day, which is all about transforming life's little annoyances into pleasures.
That's wonderful.
So it's a happy approach.
And it sounds like you also, you know, you take in the morning to be mindful, to be happy, to start the day being grateful. And I think being grateful and how they're kind of starting to spread that message in ads and big corporations, I think it's just great. People are catching on to the mindfulness.
And by the way, give us a call at 888-375-3613. That's 888-375-3613. Erica's got an amazing story. It's a very scary story, actually, about heroin and teenagers being on the rise in Orange County. Let's welcome also our other co-host, who's somewhere, Andrew Spanswick, owner and operator of KLEAN Treatment Center. He's been in the industry for a little over 20 years, so he knows a lot. Andrew, what's cooking?
Hi, Andrew.
Hey.
Hi.
I'm in Brazil.
You are?
I am in Rio.
Wow.
As what they say is,
Ipanema Beach.
when in Rio.
Ipanema. Wow.
What happens in Rio stays in Rio.
Well, it's so nice to hear from you.
Yeah, and say hi to Duran Duran for us, Andrew.
They're actually in Britain, but okay.
Yeah, but they had the Rio song.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, okay, that was years ago.
Okay,
Andrew, you see what you're missing here?
By the way, Andrew,
I know. It's like, what is going on with the show? I leave for a couple weeks, and now you're making references that don't make sense. Okay.
That was Rand, by the way. He put it in my ear. Let's go right away to, we have a call, Daryl. Let's go to Daryl in upstate New York. Daryl, listening on XM 165. What's going on? Welcome to KLEAN Radio.
Hello. I just had a few questions. Okay, I will be 51 next week.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I kind of come from, I guess you would classify me as what would be the old school partier.
Right.
Okay, it started out when I was probably about 17. I was smoking cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then that led to marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few years later, when it got up towards the 80s, I started on, like, taking, well, I don't really know if they were prescription or not, but it was on Quaaludes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have been up and down the hills for years.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, yeah, I've had a few tragedies in my life, but nothing that really set me back to a point of no return, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
But then about September, well, this September to be exactly 2 years was the last time, I just finally decided, no, not anymore. And, I mean, I've had battles with cocaine and stuff, too, back in the middle 80s. And that was another one that a lot of people or friends that I've known over the years have, like, they've had to go to rehab, this, that, and the other. And it's like, I've always managed to just turn off something in my brain that says, no, I'm not doing it.
Daryl, here's the question. You're about to be 51 years old. And when was the last time you decided to turn off the switch and say that's it?
Like I said, this September it will be exact 2 years.
That's amazing, and that's really amazing. One of the things we try to encourage, Daryl, on the show is that people don't have to wait that long. You know, Andrew, who's on the phone with us, constantly talks about raising the bottom. Right, Andrew?
Yeah, I just love the fact that he didn't think Quaaludes were a prescription. I wish I lived in those times, right? What was that, the 70s? Like, you know.
Yes, there it was.
So we're talking about Andrew raising the bottom.
Daryl, did you have a specific question?
No, I was just wondering how. I mean, it's like one of the last guys that I've seen. He had gotten off of heroin,
right?
And he was on that, like, I guess it's Suboxone or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, he knew that I was on like a higher level of prescription of oxycodone, and I was taking it like candy. And it's like, man, he says, I don't know how you do it. He says, how do you just walk away from it like that? I'm like, I don't know. I said, I guess it's just willpower and determination.
But here's the thing.
Everyone's different.
Well, wait. Daryl, lots of people have different types of constitutions, and you might be the lucky one that can take a lot of drugs and drink a lot of alcohol and be fine with it and take Quaaludes and not overdose. And I mean, we had one guest on a few weeks back who said that, you know, 2 Quaaludes and 2 drinks and you would basically overdose. In fact, 50% of all overdoses happen from mixing drugs. So, you know, you're a very lucky person that you have a constitution that can handle that type of drug use and alcohol and substance abuse.
But here's the question, Andrew. But here's an important question: is, you know, to Daryl, you constantly were switching drugs. So first of all, you were never actually detoxing off of one because you were going on another, and that was a cycle for many years. 2 years ago.
My bigger question is why is he calling in?
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. What's the question?
He's been using multiple drugs over time,
and he stopped 2 years ago.
Abuse. Like, why now call an addiction show? Is there something going on that you feel maybe you need to make a change, or you feel comfortable with everything?
No, I listen to satellite radio all the time, and I just happened to come across this station, and they started talking about the drug situation. I was like, I'm going to listen to this for a few.
That's great.
And we hope you're enjoying it. Daryl, we have an amazing guest in the studio, and I have a question for you, because this question goes to her specifically and to you. Are you happy?
Okay. Yes, I am very happy.
And Lisa?
Well, I was going to add, Daryl, you know, one of the questions that I love to ask people when I help them make an assessment of what's going on in their life are, how are your personal relationships? How are you doing? How's your love life? You know, are you in a good, happy, intimate relationship? Are you good? Are you happy with the communication that's going on in that relationship?
Right. And what sustains you?
We celebrated 21 years of marriage, and let me tell you, my wife has really put up with some crap.
Yeah.
And
I bet.
I mean, now she's one of, and then I have a 10-year-old son. But she was basically the one that put the rock on me and told me, look, no more. You got to quit this and grow up, you know. Now, that was the most stern thing that I'd ever had handed to me in my lifetime about it. But I've seen, and somehow or another, something just clicked and told me, you know what, you're a very lucky person because I'm not dead. I never was really one to drink alcohol. I could see if I could just get my quick fix in a prescription bottle or something like that, I was happy with that. So I never did really mix the two drugs, alcohol and prescription medication. But I mean,
you know, Daryl, I've spoken a lot on this show about the difference between abuse and addiction, and whether or not you were actually addicted through polysubstance abuse, or whether you just had a highly abusive nature of using drugs and alcohol throughout your life, and you used it for whatever reason you did, to feel happy or to self-medicate or whatever. But the fact that you had a principled relationship in your life that was more important than using drugs or alcohol, and you were able to stop, is unusual for people that are really, truly addicts and addicted. They have generally more problems just stopping. The fact that you were able to do that is incredible.
And the question, too, Daryl, is could you have done it at a younger age? You know, how much...
At a younger age?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I just really, didn't care.
Right.
Right.
This was his path, and,
right.
and he's obviously learned the lesson.
What I'm saying is to people, you know, that it doesn't, and Andrew talks about, and it's one of my favorite things, is that you don't have to, you know, with addiction these days and getting sober and getting help, you don't have to, you could do it at 21, Andrew. You could do it at 22, and
you don't have to be fully addicted.
Right.
If you're abusing drugs and alcohol, but not addicted, addicted is a very specific thing. It means that your body physically or psychologically is compulsively dependent on that substance or substances or process. And what we have here is an example of someone who's abusing drugs and alcohol with negative consequences and some very positive consequences, let's be honest. People don't use drugs and alcohol because they're all bad. There's some very nice things that happen. You can drink alcohol and feel very relaxed. So, you know, these people are like, just say no, like Nancy Reagan and all these, you know, temperance movement people. I mean, it's a disservice to what we're trying to do in the, you know, in reforming and moving towards a good policy and a good attitude towards people getting sober. People should get sober because when they use the substances, they don't work for them anymore. They don't make them happy. They make them more miserable.
So that's actually a good question,
There's so many better
Andrew.
ways in life to feel happy.
Andrew, that's actually a good question for Daryl. At the end, why did you stop?
Well, exactly as he just pointed out. It was getting to the point that I wasn't getting that effect anymore.
Right. It had the reverse effect almost.
Correct. And then I guess one of the answers to one of the questions earlier about, like, why was I calling in, I would just kind of like to get my story out there to let somebody hear it. You know what? No matter what walk you're walking down in life, don't never give up, because you are the only one that can ever actually do anything for yourself.
Right.
Amen, Daryl.
Daryl, thank you.
We have
Thank
to
you for
run,
that.
by the way, but thank you so much for the call. Give us a call back next week or anytime you'd like. That was great, Daryl. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And if you
I really, you know, I'd just like to add in, I really, really like Daryl's call because it points so much towards what we talk about, that, you know, it's not about, like, are you an addict and are you labeled as an addict, or are you not an addict but you just, like, use drugs recreationally and you're fine. It's about what's going on with your life and why are you using these substances. And the big problem is that the substances are getting stronger and stronger.
Right.
So someone that casually uses meth is going to find themselves in an addictive predicament that they never expected. And it's going to happen much quicker than alcohol, where it might take 20 to 30 years to really set into full alcoholism. Now, I have to qualify that by saying there's some people that take one drink and they're off to the races. You can see that change in their eyes, and immediately they're addicted. They're just genetically set up that way.
Well, that's why I liked that you said the
enzymes.
Constitution. Their Constitution's all different.
And Andrew, if you just tuned in, by the way, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. Give us a call at 888-375-3613. That's 888-375-3613. Erica, why don't you tell us a little bit about where people can find us on Facebook?
Yeah, of course. Well, we're going to be, we're live live with video stream every week, and you can find us at facebook.com/KLEAN Radio and on Twitter with the @ KLEAN Radio. So that's facebook.com/KLEAN Radio, and Twitter it's @KLEAN Radio. And just to segue really quick into, talking about how the drugs are becoming so much stronger, what Andrew was just discussing, there's been, a huge rise in heroin use among teens in Orange County recently. And I know somebody that actually just did a documentary on this because, there's kids that they're seeing, just dropping dead all throughout not only Orange County, all throughout, the United States, but particularly since we're in Los Angeles, this documentary, it's called Overtaken, and it's been really wonderful.
Are you going to bring your friend in to talk about it?
I should, yeah, I definitely should. And, it's been great because they're bringing it to the high school so that the kids could understand what oxycodone, what OxyContin is, because these kids are taking it and then they're turning to heroin and then they're, shooting up and overdosing.
Well, it's almost like they missed the gateway drug, Andrew, right? They almost missed the pot and the booze to the pot. They're starting from a heavy thing,
right, and
then jumping right to heroin,
right, without any education of really maybe how dangerous it really is. So I think this documentary is important.
The other thing is that I've been doing a lot of work in Britain, and the public health model there is about regulation of dose, and then keeping people regulated on methadone, which has turned out to be a disaster. We now have 4 generations of people that have been addicted to methadone. And what we're seeing in America is this interesting situation where oxycodone is highly regulated because it's a pill, so people know the dose, but it's so expensive that then they resort to heroin, and then they don't know how to dose.
Right.
So you get all these weird overdose situations, and that's what actually happened in Vancouver when some really pure China white heroin came in. And that forced the Canadian government to move towards a public health model where they set up shooting galleries, and then they had the ability to, stop people from overdosing.
Which is one of the most morbid things, by the way, I had ever seen, Andrew, when I was in Vancouver. But back to the story about the heroin, I mean, what do you attribute this on the rise to? I mean, Andrew, you've been in the business for 20 years. Why is it now
it's all down to money. Drugs are about money. It's always been about money. Everybody wants to get high. Everybody wants to feel better. Everybody wants to avoid their problems. Yeah. And it's about money.
So you think in Orange County, which happens to have a very higher economy in many ways, you think it's because, you go for the drugs you could afford, so you have a lot of richer kids? You can
get oxycodone for $30 a pop, and then eventually you're shooting 4 to 5 of them a day. And then, you find heroin. It's $30, and that lasts me 12 hours.
Well, it's normalized also among the peers.
And so the parents out there that are listening, give us a call, because this is really hard. Lisa, I'm sure you deal with this all the time.
Well, I deal with it all the time because I'm a parent of 2 teenagers, and this is what I wrestle with my own.
And you've struggled with it personally
to keep them safe. We have in our family history, we have some drug addiction that went on, and two kids who are now sober adults of many years, who really struggle with methamphetamines and with heroin. So
opiates.
How isolated did you feel, when this all started? Because you're the happiness coach. You're the happiness life. Like I called you the happiness entrepreneur.
But she's human, and
you're human, and that's my point, right? When you were going through this,
Well, I think that you never give up hope.
It's a good question.
Yeah. It's a great question because, as a parent, you never want to give up hope. You always want to believe that it can get better. You want to get treatment to your children. I mean, my children, thank God, at this moment are not addicted. They have never been addicted, but it is something that I wrestle with constantly to educate them and to instill in them an internal moral compass. And I think this is something that our kids are not getting in school, and oftentimes they're not getting it in the home either. How do we make the children or make them desire to be healthy?
Well, I think it's also self-love. If you teach a child how to love themselves, that they are, that they are wonderful and they're deserving of happiness, health, and all those things, then. And they truly believe that, then they won't hurt themselves. They won't self-sabotage.
By the way, sorry, but if you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. If you have any questions about this, because there are parents out there that are so struggling with this right now. There are I mean, there's so many parents across America, not just in Orange County, that have kids that are addicted to drugs, that they're so scared. They're so terrified. So give us a call at 888-375-3613. That's 888-375-3613. This is one of the hardest things.
It's very hard. And fear and denial as a parent, which are the places that we like to hide out in because we don't want to believe our kids are into bad things, are not going to save their lives.
Right, exactly.
You know, most psychoanalysts say that your moral development or moral compass is pretty much engaged from your mother, and by the time you're 5 or even younger, it's pretty much set.
So that explains a lot for me.
So let's just say, for example, let's say maybe that's true, maybe it isn't. But we're now faced with a situation, whether it's true or not, that we have people that have, you know, severe problems with these issues. Their moral compass is off. And so in your experience, how do you take on that challenge? Because we know the ability to, you know, make people recover and have insight and change their lives is very small as a percentage. What's special about what you do that makes that work?
Well, first of all, I believe that the brain is extremely powerful, and science has really borne this out, that neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to actually shift and change as a result of training. And it really is about training.
I agree.
Training, discipline, self-mastery, the self-love and self-esteem are a huge part of it. And what I do with my work is help people recognize their own worthiness by creating a positive plan for themselves. So it's re-empowering them to really realize they have more control than they think they have.
Absolutely.
That when you give your power away...
Right, but it's not just about the individual, though, right? It's about the community and the family.
Their environment.
Absolutely.
About, right?
And the boundaries they have to have also with family members, the safety plans they have to have in place. There's a lot
these are the most important things we're talking. I mean, because we always say to, especially KLEAN, was one of the things we try to really do is, you know, encourage families to go to support groups, to have a plan of action. Because if they're not getting healthy themselves, their children, their loved one, really, it's just going to be the most combative situation.
Well, they
afterwards.
need tools also, you know. Everybody does. Everyone needs an education.
I was really interested in reading about your PTSD work and then your sort of rebranding of PTSD into, what was it, PTSG, I believe?
From post-traumatic, transforming post-traumatic stress into post-traumatic growth.
Right, so you take sort of a negative traumatic situation and then you turn it into a positive by reframing it?
Yes, by reframing it. You know, how do you make meaning out of suffering? You know, we're all going to suffer. It is a guaranteed thing. We come into this world, we will not leave without suffering.
So what is the lesson learned?
What is the lesson learned?
But my question is, how do you deal with the underlying subconscious trauma that occurs from a PTSD sort of experience,
or flashbacks?
Let's say somebody's or flashback. How do you actually confront that from a therapeutic? You can't do it purely from a cognitive behavioral standpoint, right? You must be doing it by something deeper than that.
Well, it's an integrated approach. It's saying it's important to talk about what went on, to process the emotions. I will tell you that one of the modalities that the VA is using is prolonged exposure therapy, which is not working for many people. And prolonged exposure therapy, I'm sure you know, Andrew, but it's 10 to 12 visits with a therapist where you recount the traumatic event over and over and over again until you can report it like a journalist.
Right.
So there's no charge.
Kind of reframe it in your brain wiring.
Yeah.
And guys, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have an important call. So let's go to Kevin in Trabaco Canyon. Kevin, welcome to KLEAN Radio.
Hi, Kevin.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you is the better question.
You know, I've been battling alcoholism for probably the better of 12, 15 years, and I cannot get a handle on it. I've been to rehab after rehab after rehab, and I don't have any, I'm smart enough. I got pulled over for a DUI probably 7 years ago. I was able to get out of it. So I don't drink and drive because that would be stupid, because if you go through the court system, you realize that.
Right.
But, you know, I'm very conniving when it comes to my wife. You know, I can hide alcohol. I can...
You think you can.
Well, that's
sometimes
true.
you can.
But you have drinking eyes.
Right, but it's also I think what Erica was referring to, Kevin, is maybe your wife's at the point where she knows you're hiding it anyway.
Well, some of us feel like we're hiding it, and actually we're not doing the best job of hiding it. And especially if, you sound even energetically over the phone, you sound like it's really been bothering you.
Do you want to stop again, Kevin?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Are you looking
Kevin,
to get help?
Kevin, why do you think you haven't been able to stop? I mean, you've been to all these rehabs. You're obviously self-destructive with alcohol. Mm-hmm. What deep down do you think really is driving you to keep drinking? Are you in pain every day, emotionally, or what's going on?
Probably,
spiritually?
It's not physically. Cause,
right.
Most of the times I will. It's funny. I'll go to the gym, and then I'll come home and I'll drink, which you'll figure that.
So my belief is that there's an underlying compulsive disorder that has to do with brain chemistry, and that you actually can't help yourself consciously. And, most rehabs operate off of a very 12-step model, which I think is very primitive. And a lot of what we do at KLEAN is we actually work with psychoanalytic work as well as psychopharmacology. So there might be something going on with you that's much deeper than sort of the traditional way of looking at, what drives alcoholism and alcoholics. If you've exposed your brain to enough alcohol, it changes, how your brain works and how it functions. And you have a compulsive drive to drink, despite all logic.
Right.
And what Andrew's, by the way,
you've been to 6 rehabs and it doesn't work. That's like, that's you saying logically, hey, I've been to 6 rehabs. It doesn't work. I've done everything right.
Right. And he's functioning. He's going to the gym.
Right. And it's more than that. Yeah. Right. He's not, Kevin, we don't know what you've done, like when you were in the rehab. We don't know exactly what you participated in. So it'd be a little premature for us to say, but it is worth giving another shot, Kevin, because this is your life. And it sounds like a part of you. If you're still going to the gym, if you still want your marriage, that means part of you still wants to be among the living. Is that fair to say, Kevin?
Oh, absolutely.
So now let's focus on the next step and try to either get you into
Judah, this is so you, Judah, right? Because you drank for how long?
I drank, Kevin, for I drank for about 6 or 7 years, Kevin. I was the same exact way. I was in and out of 6 rehabs. Okay. From the age of 17 to about 22, Kevin, I was in and out of rehab. I couldn't put the bottle down. And I had given up. I had given up that anything could work because I was so devastated by this failure. I was like you. I had been in 6 rehabs. The trauma of failing.
Of what you've caused yourself.
And by these, and I found this time, and I'm very into the 12 steps, but I also found other things. I found a therapist that I could trust. I found all these different tools, and I started working them, Kevin. So there is hope for people like us. I get it, Kevin. I would think about a drink, and I couldn't stop thinking about the drink until I had it. But there was a thing that I had under, and that was trauma that we're talking about, right, Andrew? And it was until I was finally willing to go through the pain. And a lot of times, that's the thing, is some of us aren't willing to go through that pain. But Kevin, I could promise you this. Every time you've drank when you left rehab, something probably happened and the pain was too great. Is that sort of fair to say? Kevin?
That's a good question. Maybe emotionally?
Yes. Yeah. I'm referring to total emotions.
But you're emotional, mental, and physical. It's all.
I'm like an open book.
Right. Yeah. So you were emotionally wrecked and you couldn't handle it, so you drank, because that's the first thing alcoholics like us.
And that can even be boredom. That doesn't even have to be like a big trauma. Right. It could just be like you're just so bored and life feels so empty that you just think that the only way to feel okay is to drink.
Right.
Yeah. Lisa, do you have any? Because we're running out of time.
True, right there.
Yeah.
Well, I think that what happens is when we self-medicate because we want to numb ourselves to that fear. Mm-hmm. In reality, we've already survived the worst part of that trauma. If we've made it through to that moment when we're drinking, the worst has already happened.
Right.
So that fear is, again, that anticipatory angst and worry that we talked about earlier.
I like they said that, angst.
Angst.
Sounded so like
angst. Yeah.
But listen,
very German.
How do they say it in Brazil?
Lisa, Kevin, Andrew, Kevin, we're running out of time, but I want you to do me a favor, Kevin. Kevin, can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Can you stay on hold, because Kevin, I really want to talk to you after the show. I want to try to figure out a way of getting you help. However, we're going to do that. Whether it's me taking you to a meeting, whether it's you coming into KLEAN to check it out. I beg of you to stay on the line, Kevin. Can you do that for a couple minutes?
I can.
Kevin, thank you for calling.
Kevin, thank you for calling, and we're going to talk to you in a couple minutes. We'll talk to you soon. Andrew, sorry you came in so late to the conversation. It was a great one tonight.
But Andrew, it was great to hear your voice. Happy to get your comments.
Yeah, I got the waves beating against me. It's actually really humid down here.
Wow.
I didn't realize Brazil was so humid. So, but whatever.
Yeah.
I'll be back next week.
Okay,
though.
that's good because there's something I really want to talk to you about,
LA.
Andrew, next week, because we didn't have time to get to it tonight, but it's Kirstie Alley, and I'm going to tease everybody for all
week. Give him a teaser.
Yeah, and Andrew, thanks. We'll talk to you later.
Andrew, have a safe trip back.
Yes.
All right, guys.
Have fun.
And I also want to thank our guests so much tonight. Lisa, we didn't have enough time to get to everything. Lisa Cypers Kamen. Tell people how they could find you very quickly.
Yes.
You can find me at harvestinghappiness.com, on Facebook, Harvesting Happiness, and on Twitter at Lisa Kamen.
That's great. That's
great. So you're an amazing guest. So I'm going to ask you on our second date already. I would love for you to come back on the show. And I mean, really, just you have this. But I wanted to ask you quickly, what is your definition of happiness?
Oh, well, for me, it's been finding my voice with this work. It's really showing up to life with a sense of passion, purpose, place, and meaning. And I think to me that is sustainable happiness.
Yes, I agree.
And Erica, what's your definition?
I think.
You know what? We're going to tease it. You'll tell everybody on Facebook.
I'll tell everyone on Facebook. And then you could also tell me your definition.
My definition is actually wanting what you have. But mine's wanting what you have. That's my definition of happiness.
Wanting what you have, being happy with what you have.
Yes, and I got a great girl at home. I got a great dog.
How about being happy with what you have, being grateful for what you have?
And yes, all that stuff. But I want to thank everybody out there. I want to thank Steve behind the boards. He does an amazing job all the time. I want to thank Patrick. I want to thank Rand.
Thank you, Patrick. Rand, thank you.
And I want to thank Mark, who screens the calls, who does an amazing job back there. And I want to thank the callers. There are a lot of people out there. It's Sunday night. It's the holiday season for many. And you might be struggling. You might be going through a rough time.
Right.
Here's the deal. You don't have to.
Right.
And I'm not trying to sell you an infomercial. I'm trying to sell you what our guest Lisa was talking about, which is happiness. You could be happy at any moment.
Right. And there's help. And there's help out there. And, we want to hear your questions, concerns, comments. You could find us, on Facebook and on Twitter. So please send us those questions.
Yes, and you could always call us at 888-375-3613. That's 888-375-3613. That's for any question about addiction you might have. Thank you so much, Lisa Cypers Kamen.
Thank you.
You were an awesome
Wonderful guest.
Thanks for having me.
You're going to be back. Don't worry.
I'll be back.
And that's a promise. And please, everybody, go to KLEANRadio.com. Once again, what's your website?
harvestinghappiness.com.
That's harvestinghappiness.com. We're going to link it on KLEANRadio.com. Thank you so much to everybody out there listening. Good night, my recovery peeps, wherever you are.
Yes. Bye, everyone. Have a great week.
Are you struggling with an addiction that's ruining your life? Want to have a confidential conversation with a professional that will immediately assist you? Do you suspect a loved one is abusing drugs and would like a free drug testing kit and consultation? KLEAN Treatment Center is standing by right now to help those with addictions and the people who care about them. Call 888-601-6040. That's 888-601-6040. Or go to KLEAN Treatment Center, that's clean with a K, KLEANTreatmentCenter.com.